Okay, so time to start. Welcome everybody to this session. That is the session number 1.4 and is also the last session of this digital deep dive days that has been organized by the Emerging Area Practice Team of the Sector Group on Agriculture and Natural Resources. So the question that have come up many times during the day, and that I always hear when there are comments, is this possible? Is digitalization really functioning? So as I asked the reply to that to a chat box, an AI chat box, like, is digitalization possible? And the chat box is called Perplexity. I don't know if you know it, it's the one that I use. And it says that digitalization is a multifaceted concept that encompasses the transformation from analog into digital. So digitalization is not something that is possible or not possible, right? It's something that is just a new way of doing something. So during the day, we have showcased real cases, existing cases, that we consider already scale up or scalable or very promising, and that can be from ADB, that can be from research partner or companies that work with us or we collaborate with. So let me introduce, we continue with this last session, and in which we had very exciting examples of activities. So the participants are the following one. The first presentation will be from Papua New Guinea, and the presenter will be Regina Mukunji, which is Senior Food Security Policy Officer at the Department of Agriculture and Livestock in Papua New Guinea. And she has been working on this presentation together with Emily Schmidt, which is a Senior Research Fellow from IFPRI. The second presentation will be online, and it will be held by Paolo Manunta, which is my colleague here at ADB, and is a Senior Digital Technology Specialist. After that, we will have the pleasure to listen Annelies Deus, which is Senior Agricultural Policy Analyst at OECD. And then we will have two presentations from India. The first one will be also online, Mr. Prakash Yayaram, I hope I didn't butcher it too much, Partner Technology Consulting, Ernst & Young, and then Bertrand Souza, Chief Product and Innovation Officer at Protean e-Government Technology Ltd. So we can start with the first presentation, and thank you again to everybody for being here. So I invite to speak Regina Nukunji, Senior Food Security Policy Officer in Papua New Guinea.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This afternoon, I will be presenting on partnership and productivity, building a data analysis system for resilient agricultural growth in Papua New Guinea. And my presentation this afternoon, I will present key components for building and sustaining an informative data and analysis infrastructure for the agriculture sector. And secondly, I will also be giving a brief background of Papua New Guinea data and analysis for policy making, and followed by several examples of successful programs that have built data systems through strong human networks in order to support decision making. Now, so what are some key components for building and sustaining data systems to inform decision making? It's critical to have a medium to long-term partnership. It's not merely about building the data and digital tools to answer questions, but it's all about strengthening human interaction and connectivity to inform and utilize innovation data and digital tools. Now, the second component is to have a strong collaboration between all stakeholders, including across government agencies, donor partners, researchers, technology institutions, private sector entities, development community, and of course the end users. And final component is the capacity strengthening of building and enhancing the capacities of human network and institutions over the medium to long term. And I flipped over but those questions are the pictures there. It tells a story of family farming, subsistence farming in Papua New Guinea. And I will give a brief background on the current environment for data and analysis in Papua New Guinea. And in my capacity as a policymaker, I will be quite frank, which may be shocking to some of you, but it is what it is, and I'll just have to say it, that in PNG, policymakers work within a data-scarce environment, especially in agriculture, where our latest agriculture census was conducted in 1961-62. That's about 50 years old. Other data sets include household income and expenditure survey that was conducted in 2009 and 10. The National Nutrition Survey conducted in 2005. And we had more or less a recent one, that's Demographic Health Survey, conducted in 2016 or 18. And it is indeed a nightmare when you are expected to formulate national plans and policies based on evidence. I've worked on a couple of recent plans and policies, and I know how it is. We have a dire need to update our agriculture census after 50 years. PNG is a country with more than 80% of its population still dependent on agriculture for their livelihood and income. That percentage, 87%, is from the 2010 National Population Census. And the government has supported to conduct a recent population census and started last year, and it's ongoing this year. Now, from the background I've given, you can see that there is a need for innovative solutions to fill the data gaps. And definitely there is a need for support in building a data infrastructure that can be utilized by government, local research institutes, and development partners to inform real-time policy trade-offs. Now, this is an example, one of the examples of a smallholder farmer access and information to reliable markets that was conducted. The project was conducted in 2019 to 22. And this successful program has built data systems through strong human networks in order to support decision making. And I'm excited to say that we are a network, an infrastructure, a data system of humans. The set of pictures in the slide here tells of a blockchain-based pig traceability project using the blockchain tool to collect and track data on pig farming, management, and sales with local farmers. The challenge the pig farmers faced was having access to a reliable market to sell their live pigs at a comfortable price. So major investment to teach local farmers, government authorities, both at national and local, and on how to use the digital technology, send and receive information about pig production and marketing using a smartphone. In PNG rural communities, especially older population, seldomly own a smartphone. It's seen as a young generation gadget. So you can see teaching of basic use of a smartphone and internet connectivity was the first lesson, followed by lessons on use of the blockchain application installed for inputting pig data. The project was initiated under the government's e-agriculture strategy, and collaborative partners included the government through the Department of Agriculture Livestock, the National Internet Communication Technology Authority, and the local provincial government where the big farmers were selected, FAO, and the International Telecommunication Union. And so sustainability of this type of infrastructure requires a medium to long-term investment. Ongoing support and capacity strengthening is needed to transfer knowledge during changes in government, and also this technology could be replicated to other commodities, such as fresh fruits and vegetables or other animal species. So another example was understand agricultural suitability to key farm systems in the Makam Valley is in another province, lowlands province, and that was selected as a case study site. So the partnership was between the government of PNG, of course, Department of Agriculture Livestock, and then the Agency for Coffee Industry Corporation, the National Forest Research Institute, National Agriculture Research Institute, University of Technology, and then we had Grow PNG, and we had CSIRO from Australia who provided the technical support. It was funded by ACR. And that is a current project, started in 2022. The project envisions to upgrade our current PNG resource information system to provide more specificity all the way down to the local level or ward and agricultural land use advice to farmers and investors. The picture is that of our first contact with our local communities to seek their partnership and collaboration before doing anything on the land. And as PNG, the land is owned by the traditional landowners. The community need to understand what is to be done before they can give their consent, and this is followed by soil sampling, testing, results made available to farmers and investors to inform them of the best or the crop to grow in the soil conditions. Such information is very critical, as land is a scarce commodity with a faster growing population, especially when our country is largely covered by 78% of forest, and only 11% of the land is for cropland. This project, again, a long-term partnership with CSIRO, ACR, was an essential element to support ongoing capacity strengthening for GIS and remote sensing analysis. Now, the other example we had is we had an important collaboration between IFPRI and PNG Fresh Produce Development Agency, another government agency. And before 2018, there were no publicly available real-time price data on food items across different markets in Papua New Guinea. While different agencies collected this data, there was no central database to report price trends in the country. This program has been a long-term effort to upgrade the data collection systems of food prices in the market, using tablet-based data collection. In doing so, IFPRI worked with price collectors to collect and measure food quantity data and the price in a systematic way. Local price collectors were trained on how to input and upload food price data into the tablet software. Then analysts at the Fresh Produce Development Agency were trained on how to analyze the price data. And they used this data to send price information to local farmers so that they are aware of market prices. Our food security cluster in the country uses this data to track food prices in the market and monitor food security trends. You can download the most recent data and use the interactive graphing tool at the website that is provided here. So finally, the example that is of a recent work that was built upon 6 years of ongoing collaboration with a variety of government agencies and IFPRI. And given that we haven't had a household income expenditure survey since 2009 and 2010, which I earlier mentioned, So IFPRI recently implemented a rural household survey that has detailed survey modules on household consumption and expenditure, as well as other rural livelihood indicators. And that survey was conducted over 14 provinces. We have a total of 23 provinces in the country. And there were 270 communities selected to undergo that survey. This survey is the most comprehensive data collection effort to focus on rural livelihoods and consumption and expenditure trends since the last one in 2010 and 2009. The survey data is being used already to inform planning documents of different government departments and agricultural development programs. Most recently, we participated in a 2-week training session that used some of the survey data to simulate potential impacts on food security of a severe El Nino event in PNG. Since we are talking about digital innovation and improving access to data and resource, take out your phone. You can download this. Take out your phone and you can download this survey report using the QR code pasted here in the corner of this slide and below at the far end. I missed my slide, but that was. So, those are some of the officers that were sent to IFPRI in Washington to analyze that data. So finally, for me to conclude, I'd like to stress again that we are a network, an infrastructure, a data system of humans. The digital data space is only as effective as those that invest the time and effort to use it, improve it, and maintain it. Medium to long-term engagement with a commitment to build capacity, trust, and partnership with local institutes and analysts is key to success. There are opportunities for Asia and Pacific Island states to learn from each other, collaborate, and partner on common challenges and objectives. These opportunities are easier to realize given the technological innovation and digital tools available. However, the foundation of success will be the human network that engages, innovates, and improves these tools to meet local demands and encourage ongoing engagement. And finally, for me to say that forums such as these are a great start for informing opportunities for future investments. And if you've got any questions for me later, I'll give it over to my partner, Emily, to do all the answering of the questions. Thank you.
So thank you very much. And now for online, Dr. Paolo Manunta, Senior Digital Technology Specialist at ADB. He will present some of the amazing tools that ADB has developed over the last few years. Can we show Paolo online?
Can you see me?
We hear you. Just a second. We don't see.
More important is the presentation. Don't worry.
Let's see. Presentation. Yeah. Okay. Now we see you, and now we see also your presentation. Please go ahead.
Okay. Great. Thanks a lot, Monica and colleagues, for the opportunity. I will be presenting a cloud-based system that is allowing us to do massive processing of free and open data, mainly free and open data provided by the European Space Agency with the Copernicus constellation, but also by NASA through the Landsat and MODIS series. Okay, just setting up the stage, but not spending too much time on it. Why doing this? In Asia, we have 55%, according to FAO data. In 2022, we had a little bit more than 400 million of people affected by not enough food. So basically, we have a regional problem to be addressed, like with special technology. Let me see if I... Okay. A little bit on setting up the stage. This one is a different way than we use in ADB to do the problem trees. We can probably read or write chapters, books, and encyclopedia about the disaster effect due to climate change, but it's not the only one of the problem that's in our list. Economic factors, for example, they need to be considered in view of geopolitical situations. As you may recall, there is an important element in input data for agriculture. Scarcity of fertilizer has been spotted a few years ago due to geo-instability, actually. In ADB also we face other reasons, other problems. Especially in one country, we have been facing problem that there is a conflict, and then there is not enough to cause our headaches because there was also a drought. So we were called in to really use tools, digital tools, to see what is the effect of the drought, and mainly to prioritize on and support the human relief. A little bit on food security. This one is a schema produced, by FAO. So what we did here, we highlighted in yellow where satellite Earth observation can really contribute. Food security is at the center. Only 2 out of 4 components we can address. Food availability. What we do is actually doing monitoring, early warning system, estimation, and risk assessment. But also we provide something about food stability. You know very well that crop can go, better than expected, worse than expected in a week time. Just imagine that, we have a flood and then the whole yield is actually be lost. With satellite Earth observation, we provide not only estimates, but also tracking, because we have the capacity to monitor every 10 days. But again, the challenge is really producing maps out of a huge amount of information. Always building on why satellite Earth observation. My view is that at the single field level, the farmer is actually the best doctor in town. But then, as we saw also from our colleague before, policymakers, they need data that can be scaled from a region and also, from a province, a region, and eventually at the country level. Again, it's important to produce scenarios, upcoming events. But as we said, the tracking is very important because usually, we can do some predictions, but the prediction can be lower or in some cases also higher. What are the list of questions very quickly that we try to answer? I'm not planning to list all of them, but I wanted to pass the message that before arriving to the final results, which is, crop yields, amount of harvestable food, we go through stages. We followed when the crop has been planted, the crops, of course, on a wide area has been planted, how is it actually growing, and if there is any adverse phenomenon affecting, the final yields. Again, I'm conscious of time. This one is a little bit copter view. In order to structure, a system like a cloud system, we adopted, the tier of change. The final goal is actually the green box, the improved food security and sustainable and resilient agriculture. And we do this with a process and several ingredients. First of all, you need to be willing, you need to recognize the necessity for a change. And then you sort of put in sequence, what is the IT technology allowing you to do this? And in this case, is actually satellite Earth observation to provide evidence and based decision for better policies. One central point before getting into the policy pathway in agriculture, value chain pathway, is really to do this with the user community. And in particular, ADB has been working closely as a part of a couple of laws that we have in place in Indonesia, with the Indonesian Space Agency, but also with the Ministry of Public Works and Ministry of Agriculture. Okay, getting a little bit more into what cloud COS is. First of all, cloud COS is actually stands for a Cloud Satellite Earth Observation System. On this session today, we're focusing on water and food security. We are producing, we use the word processors. Processors are actually, for those IT savvy here, are actually complex sets of algorithms that actually are doing the processing of a wide area, satellite imagery. What do we get out of this calculation? We get some indications and some actual analytics. We're focusing at the moment on food and tree crops. So not only, like typical conditions, like typical crops as rice, but also we're trying to address, like other value crops. Another element that we're also considering as a part of the food estimates is also the quality of inland and marine waters, simply as they concern to aquaculture. Okay, I know you have been wondering about when I will show you something. Okay, here it is. So we put together this cloud system. Let me focus a little bit on the concept on the cloud. On a daily basis, globally, satellites free and open data can actually account for about 14 terabytes of data. Simply impossible to process those, with our, PCs, and simply not efficient to move the raw data across the country. Also, the concept that you may agree on is that raw data is not an information. Raw data is actually data, that requires interpretation. So basically, we put together a system which allows our selected DMCs, the developing member countries, to select an area, like spatially, you build an area of interest. You select the time that you are interested, probably, like the last month or the last year of satellite Earth observation, and then you run it, and you get the results in the form of a map. The map is actually providing a series of indicators. And here, this one is a picture of the drop-down menu only for crop processing. You see that the final goal is actually to get tree crop and biomass estimation, food crop estimations. That's the estimation you would like. But as I was mentioning before, it's very important to track how well or how bad our ensemble of fields are actually doing, and that's why we have a series of indicators, also including evapotranspiration. You may see on these slides other drop-down menu which are not actually in full shown here. Also because the system is allowing us to do also some assessment in terms of land use, land cover changes, and also the marine processors. Typical issues are chlorophyll and some level of water quality as it connects to food, to aquaculture. So basically, again, just to recap, you select the area, you select the time, you select the kind of parameters you want, and then you run it, and probably in a couple of hours, or in some cases, if you require 1 year of processing, you probably need to wait a day or so. Remember that we are processing terabytes of data placed somewhere else directly to the archive. In these slides, I want to show you, the two inputs that we use, like in sort of a light blue, satellite Earth observation, we talked about that, but also the climate data. If you follow all this arrow, it's just for you to show that before we go to the final result, which can be crop phenology, crop conditions, crop yield, and potential evapotranspiration, there are several steps. In other words, the message I want to pass to you that this system we put in place not by looking at the color of the vegetation, but really analyzing, very, very intensively, what the spectral resolutions is going to tell us. That in other words is a way to do sort of an X-ray to the crop, hopefully with good results. And finally, we also use cloud penetrating radar data. because in our latitude, clouds are a problem, and we try to see if there is a crop in some level of condition also using SAR data. I'm not going to focus too much on this one already. Basically, 3 groups of information and products in the format of maps provided: environmental parameters, vegetation index, all of you probably know already normalized differential index, climate, crop locations, crop type. This one requires also some level of training, because like the algorithm doesn't really know what's in there. So we need usually 5% of the area needs to be trained, and then we use artificial intelligence to do the processing of a larger area. Aquaculture analytic is still a work in progress, but is actually very much connected to one shrimp aquaculture project we have in ADB. Again, what I show to you is not a GIS, it's not a GeoPortal, but we use GeoPortal technology to show the map online. And in order to do that, we use GeoNode. One last concept before we go to this one is really that this technology we use is actually called in Dockers. Imagine that the Docker is a container that allows you to do some complex calculation. For now, is actually set on a cloud infrastructure that ADB is actually handling. But what we are proposing as a part of the capacity building in countries is actually for those that are interested. Of course, we have limited capacity, but at least in Indonesia, we're working on that, to take the Docker, like this container, to their own IT premises, because in some countries it's very crucial to have the data system to be resident in the country, connected to the data archive of European Commission or NASA, run the calculation and get the results locally. That concludes my presentation, but I remain at your disposal for any question. And I apologize, probably was too much of a copter overview during, due to restricted time that I had available. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So our next presenter is Annelies Deus from OECD. She was initially supposed to be here in person, and then she couldn't make it, and I jumped on the chair and said, but you need to do your presentation anyway, because it's a very innovative presentation that it's very interesting. So Annelies, are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Okay, please go ahead.
Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for that introduction, Monica. I'm very pleased to be here today and to participate in this very interesting deep dive session on digitalization. It's really a pity that I cannot be in Manila in person, and I would like to thank you, the organizers, for helping me present this work virtually. So what I'm going to do in this presentation is to cover the digitalization of sanitary and phytosanitary measures. So what do we mean by sanitary and phytosanitary measures? So sanitary means human and animal health, and phytosanitary means plant health. So SPS measures are in fact measures that countries maintain in order to ensure that food is safe for consumers and to prevent the spread of pests and diseases among animals and plants. So it's this combination of human, animal, and plant life and health. Now, these measures apply to both domestically produced food, plants and animals, but also to products coming from other countries. And so what I'm going to do today in this presentation is I'm going to focus on this international trade aspect. And that is, when countries trade food, animals and plants and products, how do they ensure that these SPS measures are maintained? And more specifically, how have digital tools changed this? So at the OECD, we have started several streams of work that examine SPS systems, and more specifically, the digitalization of SPS systems in the context of international trade. And we focused on 2 specific types of digitalization, namely the digitalization of certifications and the digitalization of audits for food safety. And so on this slide, I've listed the titles of our current and ongoing work in this area. And so for today's presentation, I will focus on those 2 types of digitalization, and then I will discuss the work that I've indicated with an arrow. So I'll focus, as the organizers have asked me to, on the practical aspects of these digital tools. So I'll spend most of my presentation on what these tools are and what they do. And then I'll also give you a little bit of a taste of the type of analysis that we have conducted based on the use of these digital tools. So starting with the first type of digitalization, namely SPS electronic certification. So again, let's start with the definition. What do we mean by an SPS certificate? Well, an SPS certificate is a non-customs document that is issued by the relevant competent authority of the exporting country to attest that a consignment complies with the SPS regulations in the importing country. Now, an electronic SPS certificate or e-certificates, these are exchanged digitally through electronic documents in a structured format based on open and agreed standards. So these definitions might be easier to understand by looking at an illustration. So here you see the paper-based SPS certification workflow, and you can just follow the numbers in the figure. So in step 1, the exporter applies for the SPS certificate to the competent authority. In step 2, the competent authority issues to the exporter a paper certificate based on a prescribed format. In step 3, the exporter then sends this SPS certificate to the importer. The importer then in step 4 submits it to the competent authority, which then clears the goods. So in this workflow, what we see is that the exporters and the importers at the bottom of the figure, they bear the responsibility for transmitting these SPS paper certificates. Now, when we're looking at electronic certificates, then this e-certificate circulates exclusively between national competent authorities, either through a bilateral relationship or through a multilateral option provided by a hub, which are these orange arrows at the top. So this means that exporters and importers no longer transmit and submit certificates anymore. So in step 3 of the workflow, there is no transmission or a mailing of a paper SPS certificate, only the notification that the certificate has been issued and that the consignment is underway. So in the last 2 slides on eCert, I would just like to give you a taste of the type of analysis then that we conduct. So the picture on the left shows clearly the motivation for this research, namely that even though e-certification was already used before the pandemic, we really saw a huge dramatic increase following the COVID-19 pandemic. And so in the project that we're conducting, we're doing 2 things. First of all, we're taking stock. So we're looking at what's the current use of these SPS certificates. And in the second step, we're quantifying the impacts on trade of using these SPS certificates. And we do this by conducting a survey based on 4 questions. And so this slide shows some preliminary results on the current use of SPS electronic certificates. So these graphs, in fact, twice show the same information, but represented differently. So on the left, you have the sending of electronic certificates, and on the right, receiving of electronic certificates. And the top figure shows the countries that are receiving, and the bottom figure shows the countries that are sending. And the way to read it is that, for example, in the top graph, you can see that Argentina is receiving phytosanitary e-certificates from 20 countries. And in the lower graph, you see that Argentina is sending phytosanitary electronic certificates to 39 countries. So 2 initial preliminary results are that we notice that more countries tend to receive on the left, and fewer countries tend to send electronic certificates. And a second preliminary result is that there are more phytosanitary electronic certificates exchanged than sanitary electronic certificates. Okay, so then now let's go and look at the second type of digitalization of SPS measures, namely remote audits. And also here we had a similar motivation, namely the COVID pandemic really accelerated this use of digital technologies because of all the restrictions, the lockdowns. And this was also the case for food safety audits, which were conducted remotely using ICT, or information and communication technologies. And then the question is, well, you know, what is the role for remote audits now that all these restrictions have been lifted? Because they may have been good enough during the most intense moments of the pandemic, but are they really a good, appropriate technology for continued use in the future? And so to answer this question, we developed this study at the OECD where we examined several aspects of remote audits, namely the costs, the benefits, their effectiveness, what are some of the most useful practices, and what are the viewpoints in terms of continued or broader adoption in the future. And this report was published last year. So when we started this research, we quickly realized that people mean different things when we talk about remote audits. So some people say, oh, an audit is remote if you use ICT for documents. And other people say, well, it's a remote audit only if the visit is done virtually. And so in addition to that, there are also a bunch of terms that are used, such as partially remote, blended approach, traditional audit, in-person audit. And so we said the first thing we have to do is to make sure that when we talk to people and we design a survey, we have to be clear about the terminology that we're using and what we mean by a remote audit. So we started by looking at the audit itself, and we said, okay, there are 3 different stages to an audit. So there is stage 1, the preparatory process, stage 2, the audit itself, and then stage 3, the post-audit. And then to define a remote audit, we focused on the key activity of the audit process, namely the evidence gathering activities in stage 2. And we saw that there are 3 types of evidence gathering activities, namely review of documents or records, interviews, and observations or site visits. Now, if we're looking at this evidence gathering, there are 2 methods in which evidence can be gathered. So first of all, it can be gathered using non-remote methods. So this means that documents are reviewed using hard copies of the documents, interviews are conducted in person, and then to visit a site or an establishment, the auditors physically travel to the site and inspect and audit the physical site. But all these 3 activities, evidence gathering activities, can also be done remotely, and that's illustrated in blue. So the documents can be reviewed using electronic copies, the interviews can be conducted via Zoom or Teams meetings, and the site visits can be done by cameras or by filming. And so this then for us became the key way to define a remote audit, namely we're focusing on these evidence gathering activities. And then this brings me then to the definitions that we are using in this research. So we start from those 3 types of activities of evidence gathering, and we say that if all these activities take place on the location of the auditee, then we're speaking about an on-site audit. But if some or all of these activities are performed remotely, then we say it's a remote audit. And then in the case of a remote audit, we also distinguish between 2 types, namely a partially remote audit and a fully remote audit. And so in a partially remote audits, some of these evidence gathering activities take place on the location of the auditee and others are performed remotely. And in a fully remote audit, all of these evidence gathering activities are performed remotely. So let me now turn to the findings of the research. Our interviews showed us that the use of remote auditing was mainly a response to the pandemic disruptions. Something that we quickly realized is at the most basic level, there was a lack in shared definitions and what constitutes a remote audit. And if you want to start talking about costs, benefits, effectiveness, it's really crucial that you are using the same technology. So that's why in this report, we propose this new terminology based on how evidence is gathered. A third thing that we noticed is that the technologies that are used for remote audits are pretty basic, often just a smartphone and a video conferencing platform. And fourth, from our conversations at the time, we noticed that the level of existing formal policy guidance, standards and guidelines was very limited. And then a final finding was that there was a widespread agreement in our interviews that remote audits were likely to become more efficient over time. Now, when we compared then remote audits versus on-site audits, a first finding was related to the structure and the sequencing. And we noticed that remote audits are more disaggregated and iterative in time and in space than on-site audits. Another thing that we noticed is that remote audits require more document analysis than on-site audits because in a remote audit, they tend to send a lot of documents electronically because it's much easier. Another thing that we did is that we did a survey, and in this survey we compared remote audits to on-site audits in terms of costs, expressed in time, people, and money. And what we noticed is that in terms of time, that the remote audits were more demanding than on-site audits in terms of time in that first stage, at preparatory stage. So because of all these documents that were sent electronically. In terms of cost of people, we noticed that remote audits required about the same amount of people in both stages. And in terms of money, the remote audits cost less in terms of money, especially in stage 2, so the audit. And that makes sense, right? Because the auditors are conducting the site visits virtually. They're no longer traveling to the sites. And then my final slide is on the effectiveness about the remote audits. And so when we looked at all the respondents of the survey, we noticed that more than half of the respondents considered that remote audits were less or much less effective than on-site audits. Then if we split the results between the fully and the partially remote audits, we see a remarkable difference in views on effectiveness. And we see that nearly 60% of the respondents said, well, fully remote audits are less or much less effective. But if you're looking at partially remote audits, then 60% thought that they were as effective as on-site audits. And finally, we also compared the auditor view with the auditee view, and we noticed that auditors tended to consider remote audits to be less effective than auditees. And then we also had a question about the support for continued use of remote audits. And we noticed that in the end, the majority of people indicated that they support remote audits, but only for certain situations. And so in the interest of time, I'm going to stop here, but looking forward to the discussion and the questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And so you can imagine if OECD is doing that, what would happen if Asia was able to do this kind of technology for the trade between countries, ASEAN or something. Okay, so now we have the first one of the two presentations about the system that's called AgriStack. ADB is supporting the development in India. And the first speaker on this is Mr. Prakash Jayaram from Ernst & Young. I'm not able to, I'm sorry, I'm butchering your surname, okay? Can we see the presentation of Prakash online?
I'll present it, Monica, if that's okay.
Yeah. No, but wait a second. Now we are waiting for your presentation to appear. Now you are in the screen. That's already something. And yes, you can start. Thank you very much.
Yeah, is my presentation visible?
Yes. Your presentation is on the screen.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you, Monica, for the opportunity and the introduction. I'm Prakash Jayaram, partner with Ernst & Young in India, and I've been leading a team that focuses on digital agriculture, which over the last 4 years has grown to almost 100 people as digital agriculture comes of age within the country. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the focus on digital public infrastructure for agriculture, which India is building. And as Monica said, it's called AgriStack. So, you know, I wanted to just spend a little bit of time on our initial approach to solving problems in agriculture. And I think in most countries, this is how we start, right? We recognize that across the agriculture value chain, there are various problems to be solved, you know, and many of these problems are common in the global south or the developing countries, as we're now referring to them in the context of the G20 and other international fora. But there are various problems that exist across the value chain, from sowing or plantation, cultivation, production, harvesting, storage, processing, distribution, agriculture, logistics, markets. And there are a variety of very specific solutions that people come up with to address some or a few of these problems. I'm not going to go into those problems, but I just wanted to move ahead. And in India as well, when we started about 6 years ago, in fact, ADB was the first to provide me an opportunity to think about using technology to solve agriculture in the context of an engagement that we did in Cambodia. And in 2016, actually, almost 8 years ago now. And we started our work, using all kinds of new and relevant and recent technologies, like using remote sensing, artificial intelligence, weather forecasting, blockchains, market analytics with time series, various kinds of applications of artificial intelligence and machine learning, time series analysis, geotagging, geospatial analytics, etc. And we realized that as we started using all of these kinds of solutions, in every instance, the challenge was that where is the data? Where is the good, high quality, near real time, granular data available for these technologies to use to solve the problems? And in most of the developing countries that we encountered, the data simply isn't there, or it's not at a consistent level of quality. It's not there at a consistent level of recency. It's not there for a geographical coverage which can be classified as uniform. And therefore, we started looking at, over the last 2 to 3 years, a very different approach to solving problems in agriculture, in digital agriculture, an approach called digital public infrastructure. And I'll explain a little bit about what this is, but essentially it enables government service delivery and public-private partnerships. So what we're doing in India is we're building this digital public infrastructure for agriculture, and the government is doing this to enable ecosystems of services. There are two main infrastructures. One is AgriStack, which I will explain in more detail in this presentation. Another was Krishi, or farming DSS, or decision support system, which is a geospatial digital platform which aggregates multiple geospatial layers. AgriStack, as I will explain, is primarily around 3 registries and various other supporting registries. Now, this digital public infrastructure, in turn, is supported by some key foundational interventions, like a digital crop estimation survey that provides real-time crop yield estimates, and geotagging of various schemes that rely on land, and various interventions that actually deliver subsidies to the farmers, and then mapping the soil and its fertility. And using these foundational interventions and the digital public infrastructure, an ecosystem of various services, not only for food security, but various other purposes, can be developed. Right? So I'll talk a little bit about AgriStack. Right? So AgriStack is an ecosystem for facilitating the digital services, delivery of digital services. It's developed by the government, and it actually enables ecosystems to be developed by agri-techs, farmer-producer organizations, and other service providers, which could include public and private entities, right? What does it comprise of? It's essentially databases and registries. And registries are nothing but high-quality, validated, verifiable, or verified databases that can be accessed by the ecosystem. It is a set of data standards which ensures that anybody that connects to this ecosystem adheres to and complies with those standards. It's a set of APIs, or application programming interfaces, which are specified so that people can easily access the data as per the standards. It's a set of policies for data sharing and data collection that ensures that it is, data is privacy protected, that it is only available to authorized users for authorized purposes, etc. And it's a set of government IT systems, both at a central government level or a state or a provincial level. In most of the countries that we deal with, agriculture is actually, the policies for agriculture are set centrally, but the execution and the operation of these policies and the collection of data is usually at a state or a provincial level. So its IT systems at multiple levels, at a central level and at a state level, and a regulator or a set of regulations that enforce all of this, right? So that's what the digital public infrastructure largely is. And just as a quick aside, India has been working extensively on creating digital public infrastructures. The most famous amongst them so far have been Aadhaar, or the unique identity system for the country. And it has enabled services like UPI, or the unified payment interface, which enables peer-to-peer or person-to-merchant payments using QR codes and mobile phones. So digital public infrastructure has now become an ethos or a way of solving problems in a large scale. And this is what the digital public infrastructure for agriculture, or agri-stack, looks like. Now, it's also about taking an empathy-driven, farmer-centric approach to solving problems, right? So at the heart of this is the farmer, a disadvantaged woman farmer, who's provided an identity, which in India is authenticated against Aadhaar, and it's authenticatable with a single sign-on or a e-know your farmer, so you can identify farmers reliably and easily. It's a set of assets that are verifiable and non-reputable for the farmer, which is their land and the crop that they grow. And these are offered up by digital signed artifacts, which I will show you some examples of. And finally, these enable through the APIs digital transactions, which again enable opportunities via open networks, giving the farmers access to markets, inputs, credit, advisory, and various government schemes. So at the core, what kind of questions does the AgriStack answer? It answers whether someone is a farmer and who is a farmer. It answers the question of what crop have they grown and in how much area have they grown, and what land have they grown the crop on, and where is this land? And it answers these questions reliably because the processes that are being used to acquire this data and maintain it are being standardized and are validatable and verifiable, thereby increasing the reliability of this data and the cost of access to this data. So what it is then there's three core registries of AgriStack, which is the farmer registry, where farmers will have a single registration in their lifetime. And this digital identity that the farmer gets will give them easy access to services. If you know someone is a farmer, you can easily give them subsidized seeds, fertilizers, credit, etc. And these are linked, the farmer's identity is also linked to the georeferenced village maps, which identifies the locations and the boundaries of their farmlands precisely. And this in turn is fed into a digital crop survey, which creates a crop zone registry every season. India typically has two main seasons, Kharif, which is the monsoon season, and Rabi, which is the winter season, and a third summer season in case there is adequate water left over. But every season you would have a crop survey being done and linked to the land and the farmer. And this then becomes a single source of truth for the crops grown. And this is actually done with physical inspection and proofs. Now, these three core registries are also supported by various other supporting registries. Now, you may ask, what are these? These are essentially master data standards. So, for example, there are 300 crops which are largely grown across India. And these crops have been contributed by various states in the federal structure. And those are being tracked across the country. These crops may have different names in different regions, but it establishes a common vocabulary across the country so that a buyer in, let's say, an urban location in Mumbai can identify a pineapple as a pineapple, and that the pineapple that is grown in the northeast of India and called ananas locally can still be recorded as ananas, but it establishes that portability of vocabulary. Similarly, we are standardizing various supporting registries like seeds, seed dealers, fertilizers, pesticides, the agriculture research centers, and these registries are being standardized. The data in these registries is being standardized by a set of committees, and they are contributed to by the stakeholders in the ecosystem. Some of these are also external, like non-banking finance companies, banks, or farmer producer organizations and service providers. And this ecosystem of various government committees across different ministries is again available to the entire ecosystem to use. So by enabling this data standardization, we catalyze the interoperability and we accelerate the development of ecosystems. So another important component of this is what we are calling a unified farmer service interface. So this is essentially a definition of data standards and a set of APIs or application programming interface. So this green ring that you see actually will bring together the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare at the central government level, the states or the federal agriculture departments. It also brings together other ministries that deal with farmers like fisheries, animal husbandry, and it lets them contribute and access data, or other state government departments like revenue. Land in India is a subject of the revenue ministry or the revenue department, and land and agriculture obviously are very closely related. But by defining a UFSI specification, now Bert will actually explain some of these technically. But this brings together contributions and access to data across various ministries like fisheries, irrigation, food and civil supplies for procurement, etc. Eventually, private sector will also be co-opted and various other government agencies like research agencies. All of them access a standard data definition and a data specification and thereby catalyze the ecosystem. So I'll give you some examples. Right? So this is an example of a farmer registry, right? Where you have a farmer ID being given, which is deduplicated using India's unique identifier Aadhaar, along with their name and demographic details, photographs, their locations of individual land parcels and their extents in hectares. This is verified data that is actually verified by the revenue department, and it is integrated with land records. So each time there is a mutation or a change in the title, the farmer registry gets updated as well. Going to the crop survey. So a digital crop survey is actually done by somebody, a surveyor, who takes a mobile phone and an application, walks into the boundary of the parcel of land, takes a picture, identifies the crop against the standard crops, and takes a photo that's geotagged, timestamped, and enters the area of that crop that has been sown. Now, the challenge in India is that farm sizes are small, typically around a hectare, and even these are multi-cropped. So satellite images are not very accurate. And with 300 crops, the digital NDVI and other signatures don't really give you good results. Eventually, over time, if we have good data or with photographs, you would be able to map things like NDVI signatures from satellite images and connect them to the photographs so that you can improve the algorithms to recognize cropping patterns from satellite signatures or drone signatures. But we are building this data set for crops sown on each of the fields, and it's an estimated 600 million pictures, 600 million fields where pictures will be taken every season by farmers themselves or by surveyors that are appointed by the government. Right, so this is how it will look eventually once a crop survey has been completed. This is an example of a village in the northern state of Uttar Pradesh, where photos of rice or fallow area or sugarcane or pearl millet or bajra or non-agricultural area in some cases or mango orchards are taken. And these crops are identified against a standard crop, and the hectares or the area of that crop for each farm is plotted. And at a village level, you get an aggregate area that is sown. So that's the crop sown estimates. Of course, from a food security perspective, this doesn't give you the yield. It only gives you the sown area. Yield estimates are statistically derived, and you can actually derive how much the food production is from the crop survey as well. So, two views of this. At the state level or the provincial level, each plot-wise data will be available in the state. And at the central federal government level, you get an aggregate area of a crop sown at each village. So you can still estimate production. And this is to preserve the federal structure of agriculture where the states have the jurisdiction over the farmers, their land and the crops. Whereas the central government still needs it for food security planning, for procurement planning, etc. So both purposes can be served. And a variety of use cases, as I will go through in a bit, will also be enabled through this, right? Now, one of the other fallouts is that a golden record of a farmer is also buildable in AgriStack. So you know the demographic information of the farmer, the locations of each of their land parcels along with their area, the crops that are sown along with the photographs and the area of the crop that has been sown. And that is also available season by season. So you can actually establish a cropping pattern of each farmer. And as Bert will explain, all of this data is privacy protected through consent managers and only accessible with consent to authorized central government, state government, or other seekers of this data. Farmers will also be given digitally verifiable credentials that identify their crop sown and their identity as a farmer. And this QR code, which is here, actually is a signed, encrypted set of data that they can take to a bank and get a loan, or they can take to a procurement center and avail of the minimum support price or the price support schemes which have been established in India for food security. Of course, all of these are still in pilot stage, and the expectation is that in another season or so, 10 to 14 states in the country will be operating these use cases at scale. Right? So there's various use cases, and I'll go through those fairly quickly. For one, with the UFSI, the consent and the registries, central government and state government schemes will all integrate and access the data and digitally deliver the schemes. For example, an income support scheme called PM Kisan, which offers 6,000 rupees every year to a farmer, can be completely digitally delivered. Or a farmer loan, which is based on the crop sown, again, can be delivered in 30 minutes. We've done pilots of this in 2 states, with all of the documentation being digital. Eventually, private sector entities will also be authorized to access these registries, and huge number of use cases can be enabled by this digital public infrastructure, right? Access to various kinds of finance, insurance, various kinds of loans, access to various kinds of actionable advisories, which are crop specific and farm specific, because by adding weather data, you now know conditions that are farm and crop specific, and you can provide advisory for markets, for pesticides, disaster, etc. Farmers will have access to seeds, fertilizers, other kinds of inputs, because knowing what the farmer typically sows, various seed suppliers can actually reach out to farmers to sell their seeds widely, right? Not just local, but across the country. And farmers can also get preemptive access or proactive access to markets, not only local, but international as well, because from the crop survey, there is verifiable evidence that a certain crop, even a certain seed, has been sown, providing the farmers traceability, right, and access to various markets. So one such use case, especially in the context of food security, and this is already being piloted in the northern state of Uttar Pradesh, is the minimum support price-based procurement. So the farmers register on AgriStack, get a farmer ID, and the crop survey provides them evidence of what area and what crop has been sown at what location. And by adding the yield estimates which come from different sources, you can determine what is the estimated production for the farmer from the farms that have been linked to the farmer. That then allows the procurement process to send an intent to the farmer and tell the farmer to take the produce to a nearest collection center. When the farmer goes there, they just need to provide their ID and the crop zone certificate, and the product is transferred to a warehouse, and the payment for that production is directly sent to a bank account that is linked to the farmer's Aadhaar and ID. So this entire procurement process is digital. It provides proactive signals to the farmer as to where they need to take their produce, thereby making it more convenient to the farmer. It also gives better production estimates and better purchasing estimates for the food security. There's a few other use cases as well, that fertilizer subsidies can be better managed, providing better optimal use of fertilizers, improving climate impact,
Sorry, Prakash, I need to ask you to speed up a little bit because
I'm done. This is the last slide, right? And similarly, we talked about the income support scheme. So as I mentioned, we have planned a variety of use cases. At this point, we are building up these registries, and in the next 2 seasons, we are expecting that the registries will be available in more than half of the country, enabling these use cases going forward. I'm done, Monica. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, imagine what is this meaning, right? Meaning an entire registry of every single crop in a country of 1.4 billion, in which, thanks to this registry, farmer can assess credit in 30 minutes. Yeah. So to follow, because we are so enthusiastic with this thing that we are doing in India, we think that we also want to explain you a little bit more from the technological point of view, in this case. So I call this time in person Mr. Bertrand Souza, which is Chief Product and Innovation Officer at a company called Protein e-Government Technologies Ltd, and will explain the technology behind AgriStack.
Thanks, Monica, for the introduction, and extremely grateful to the entire ADB team for having me here to be a part of this and for supporting us in this amazing project. So I'm the Chief Product and Innovation Officer at Protein. I have multiple teams helping me to digitize multiple sectors in the country. So what we do is extremely infrastructural, creating digital public goods or digital public infrastructure and unlocking digitization across multiple sectors that you see there. Just a quick snapshot into the kind of scale that we operate at as a company and the areas where we have seen digitization in India already take shape. And Prakash already called out in the previous session some of the numbers that India has been actually getting global kind of credit for. As an organization, we have been doing something like more than 500 million people interfacing for various products across taxation, across pension, and across identity. And this cuts across all of the sectors that I showed you in the previous slide. It's also interesting for us to know that the government's vision has been focused on digitizing more. So while we already have so much happening, how do we digitize more and create new sector digitization plans? That's when the concept of open networks and open digital ecosystems shaped up a couple of years ago. And AgriStack for us fit extremely beautifully into that scheme of things. So I've called out a couple of other sectors on this slide, but I will not go into that today. We've also built a cloud and infosecurity services business, which supports a lot of MSMEs and small businesses to come onto cloud, which is a made in India stack. And we also have a data stack, which we are looking at unlocking value on top of a lot of these DPIs. So we're not just focusing on creating the infrastructure, we're also looking at creating value for participants in the ecosystem on top of that infrastructure. On the AgriStack itself, Protein has been the core technology partner, working very closely with Prakash and his team. And what we have been able to achieve till date is pretty remarkable in under a year. We built the core AgriStack registries, which I'll go into a little bit more detail. The UFSI that he spoke about, which is the Farmer Service Interface, is basically an interoperable protocol. And without having this data definition or interoperable protocol, imagine India, a very complex country with so many different states, all speaking different schemas. And it is absolutely impossible for someone like a lender or a bank or an advisory startup to be able to consume data and ingest it in a standard form. So this became a very core kind of problem to solve from an information symmetry view. The consent manager is something which is also extremely unique because we realize with data comes a lot of responsibility of how do you protect the farmer. Today you have a lot of agri-techs pulling data from various parts of the ecosystem with no consent at all. And that's extremely disturbing to know that in a world where data is only going to be more and more, how do we design this right from the start itself? And that's something which we have done remarkably well. So a little technical busy slide, but just to help you understand the complexity of what AgriStack is all about. If you look at the extreme left, you basically look at the ingestion of data that comes in from states. So being a federated architecture, every state government will of course have their own farmer data. It sits there. You have data coming into this first block, which we have called out as a state level AgriStack tool, where the data is then further processed and sent in this unified format to the center block, which is over there. And that's where we have the magic of AgriStack coming into play, because there's no data of the farmer that's being stored in the central piece. It's only stored at the states. But the blue block that you see at the bottom is where the actual API stack is made available to the entire ecosystem. So if there's a lender or if there's an agri-tech company seeking data about a farmer, they can just come in through a unified interface and say, please feed me this data, here's the farmer ID. I will go into a little more detail subsequently, but just to explain the core block on this slide, which is the Universal Farmer Service Interface, Prakash touched upon it. It really solves for 3 registries today, which is your farmer demographic database, your land records, the crop survey, which happens in periodic cycles, and also the georeferenced village maps. So these are the 3 large core registries which have actually been standardized in this initial phase. A lot of the supporting registries that he spoke about are currently going to be ancillary to AgriStack. Looking at the data ingestion architecture, extremely simple. These are the 3 registries that I spoke about: farmer, crop, and maps data. And we have the state and center speaking a beautifully orchestrated, simple, standard language. This is pretty much the fundamental premise of how a payment system like UPI also hits at scale, just with interoperable rails. So we believe with a simple data schema and with multiple parameters enabling flexibility, this becomes the real bedrock of AgriStack. Looking at the value it unlocks for both center, state, and the end farmer, I'm just going to walk you through a couple of views. So this is the kind of view at a macro level that you can expect the government to have, across the country. How are the kind of farmer digitization IDs going? What's the status of surveys? What's the status of crop zone? And all of this trend over a period of time is also something they can just view at the click of a button. And it's that simple. You also see a state level drill down where you can get, at a center level is across the country, state level is for the state. Again, you can look at multiple drill downs, multiple data cuts. At a state level, you can also see from a data ingestion perspective, how is the data flow working? Because there is complexity to data. Data is not clean. Data has to go through multiple stages of filtering it down, especially when you're building something of this scale and complexity. So there is visibility that they have at every single level to see what's going right, what's going wrong, what's successful, what's failing. A lot of this is all dummy data, but it just shows you the output and the power of the output that it delivers both to the government and to the states. So this is how survey, and Prakash touched upon this in his last presentation as well, how the crop analysis can really help show which particular kind of crop is actually flourishing in which part of the country, what's the density, and so on. Again, just another visualization. It's just unlimited number of data cuts that we have been able to pull out of the data that we sit on at this point of time. So quickly walking you through, because I think Prakash spoke extremely well about the use cases. I said, let me actually show you a couple of these use cases and how it looks like to the end farmer. And I'm going to start with a very simple but the most popular use case which I expect, which is going to be lending. So imagine the very first screen on your left where the farmer comes in with a unique farmer ID, which is something that the AgriStack will generate for him or her. And this farmer ID goes into the input form of the lender's application. The farmer selects the state consent manager, which is the state he's associated with. And then the lender application pushes a notification to the farmer. This notification, while it's not shown here, typically goes like an SMS link. And when the farmer clicks on the link, he gets a screen which looks like the second one, which actually shows him or her the quality and the type of data, what's being shared and for what period of time. So you can actually see consent request will be valid till so-and-so date. And you have crop data for multiple periods of time. So there can also be partial consent. And this level of consent framework does not exist anywhere. In fact, in India, you have something called the account aggregator, which is a consent framework for the BFSI and the banking sector. This is far more advanced because it supports for partial consent, full consent, and rejection as well. And on the third form, you can basically see that the lender has now accessed this data and the lender has processed it, sanctioned it, and disbursed it. So this is where we expect, you know, the use case to really fly. And we have seen already, like Prakash mentioned, a bunch of CUG pilot loans have already gone through. This second one that I wanted to touch about, and this is my last slide, I wanted to keep this extremely brief, but the small video clip that I'm going to play for you will talk about how we have been able to visualize as Protean multiple DPIs that we work with. So the Open Network for Digital Commerce, the Open Network for Education and Skill, which allows for short point-in-time skilling, AgriStack, which we just spoke about, the account aggregator, and Bhashini, which is a language LLM in India. So this is just to give you a flavor of how DPI, can we have the volume turned on, please, and AI coming together. Thank you so much.
So, in synthesis, the entire concept of agricultural statistics crashed down, and a new concept of data management and market process is coming into place. And this has already happened with the UPI, but it's continuing. So now I would invite the guests that are here, meaning Regina and Bertram, to come back to the sitting near me for replying to questions. And I also ask to Paolo, Annelise, Prakash to open their video so that we can project them. And also ask to the technical people at the back of the room to show, yes. So I see Paolo, I see Annelise, and I see also Prakash. So at this point, I would like to ask if there are any questions. People can access the Microsoft at the center of the room. Thank you, and please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. My name's Fiona Lynn. I'm with the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. And I wanted to address my question to the AgriStack thing. I'd just be interested to understand whether you've taken any particular steps to allow women to access the technology. I mean, I did, and I'm being a little cheeky here, but I noticed in your video there was no pictures of women using the technology. Thanks.
I'm telling them since 3 years.
Feedback accepted.
I normally would like to have 2 or 3 questions together and then reply all of them in a batch. Is there any other question?
I'm Kosturi, and I'm an independent consultant. My question is also to Agritech. It's a very fascinating platform. The question is, who would own it? Who controls this? And with so much of farmers' protests happening against government, how are these platforms going to handle this? Thank you.
Okay, third question. Yeah, please.
Yes, hi, and thank you for your presentations. A quick question. I am Greg from OpenSPP, Open Source Social Protection Platform. We're also building a farmer registry. And I wanted to ask a question about the AgriStack. I know that as part of the India Stack, MOSIP, IIITB are working on a lot of open source components and open source solutions. And I wanted to ask you if some of the components of the AgriStacks will be open sourced in the future. Thank you.
So I think probably Prakash is the best person to address most of these questions.
Sure, thanks, Monica. Right, so I'm sorry I didn't get people's names, but the lady from Australia, I'll answer her question first. So interestingly enough, the prototype persona for whom we are actually trying to solve the problem is a woman farmer, or we've actually called her Shanti. And a lot of the challenge in India is that while a lot of the women are the people actually doing the farming, very few of them actually have land records and land in their name. And we are being cognizant of that, and therefore we are actually trying to solve for Shanti and her problems. I did not include that side, but she is the primary persona who is the target of these solutions. And making things easy for her to access and reach is very critical for us. So that was the first question, and that's why the first picture was a woman, and that's Shanti. So the second question was around the sensitivity, who's going to control AgriStack, and how is it going to ensure that the farmers' interests are protected. I think that I paraphrase that question because the protests are obviously in the nature of farmers feeling that their interests are not adequately protected. So the way the ecosystem is designed is that the central government is actually the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare has created a set of committees which include multiple ministries in the design of AgriStack. So this includes various ministries that interface with farmers and the Ministry of Revenue and Land Records, so that at least from a government perspective, various ministries that have a touch point with the farmers are included. The steering committee for AgriStack also includes representatives from various state governments, and the 5 of the largest state governments are represented on the steering committee, and they will be changed by rotation as AgriStack is rolled out. So from a governance structure, we are being very, AgriStack is being very inclusive in setting up the right kind of governance. Now, initially, the focus of AgriStack is to build the technical infrastructure and the data sharing frameworks in the context of delivery of government schemes to farmers. Even today, most of the services to farmers in India are delivered by the government. Of course, there is a large private sector role to be played in terms of inputs and finance and other aspects. But the intent is, once we have a robust consent framework which is tested in various scenarios, and Bert had shown how the consent framework enables the farmer to granularly share data, including for a specific crop or specific plot of land and a specific field for a specific duration and a specific purpose with a specific entity. All of these are available. One might ask, is the farmer informed enough or capable enough of exercising their right to share data? I think farmers can be educated to do this. And also, it's a valued decision that each one of us needs to make on whether we share data or not. All of us are happy to share our location, for example, to get Google Maps and traffic updates. Similarly, farmers might be willing to share their data if they want access to government or private schemes and services. Or they might just lock it down and say, I don't want to share any data. I'm happy getting whatever I need on my own. So I think we built in the safeguards from a governance structure and technically have implemented those safeguards also in terms of the consent frameworks, both at the farmer level and at the state government levels. Right? So hopefully that answers the second question. And the third question was around open sourcing some of these AgriStack components. So there are two parts to this. So the first is the overall framework and the protocols. They're all being built on a technology stack that is based on open source technologies. But I don't think it's at a point where the overall framework itself is ready to be open sourced. I think a little bit of maturity is required before that gets open sourced. We are consulting various architects, including those that have contributed to MOSIP and various other technology stacks as we architect AgriStack. And it is built using the same principles as other digital public infrastructure and digital public goods that are being developed, not only in India, but globally, right? And specifically as part of AgriStack, there are various reference applications that we are building. For example, the application that builds and manages the farmer registry or the crop survey applications. These are being initially open sourced to the states who are the collectors of data. And they are free to either use the applications as is, or they are free to change the source code and tailor it to their requirements, or they are free to incorporate pieces of the source code and applications that they have built themselves. Eventually, the intent is as private sector entities also get involved, the core applications or key parts of the core applications, the technologically complex parts, will be open sourced, and that is the intent. Now, the intent of AgriStack is to have an open source, open standards-based ecosystem so that the builders of use cases have access to not only the open standards-based APIs and protocols, but also pieces of code that they can rapidly use and adapt. I'll stop here. Hopefully, I've answered the questions.
So for me,
Monica, if I can just jump in with one more data point on the third one.
Sorry.
So I think to
give you the second round. Yep.
Thank you. So I just wanted to make sure that it's clear what he called out, that the APIs and the infrastructure will enable innovation with open protocols. So maybe the application which powers it right now is still going to be a proprietary application for some period of time, but the access and the interoperability to connect to it will be made available to certain types of entities. Now, what those types of entities are will be part of the policy.
Thank you very much. And I also want to say something about all this because, I mean, I'm also coordinating AgriStack from the headquarters of ADB, right? Although there is also Christian in the public that is coordinating AgriStack from India, also from ADB India. So for me, this question about the privacy, first of all, AgriStack is a government system, okay? So I am European. In Europe, all the data of people is parcelized in 20 different databases that they do not talk each other. It's like not having a database. I think in Italy, Paolo, how many identity cards do we have in this moment? 3 different identity cards, right? Something like that. So,
correct.
Yes. So in reality, digitalization is a disruption of something, but it's a disruption that built on what the human being has been doing over the time. So what the government of India is trying to do is putting the information together in a way that is not, as much as possible, not dangerous in any way for the farmers, and it can be used as easy as possible also for private sector. Entities that want to, like giving them a loan that the farmer is asking. The point is, it's not a civil society tool. That's for sure. Okay, so there is never, but it's not even Google, okay, right? It is a state. So it is, there is always a balance, but it's like digitalization reflects the imbalances that there are in the society. It is not indifferent. So is there a different, is there any other question? I have an online question. I don't know the name of the person, but they are asking if AgriStack is informing farmers about climate change, agricultural cropping partner, and availability of water, etc. So this is the first question. Any other question for the public in person? Yes, please.
Thank you for the opportunity. I've got this question of the very generalist sort on equitability and sustainability aspects of enterprise. What's the feel of panel when asked about a good balance between state capitalism and private enterprise?
Thank you. Can you reply to the one of the climate change, please?
Sure. I think climate change as a registry and as a data set, I think is something which will definitely become part of the supporting registries. And what we are seeing increasingly as a trend is, if you saw the architecture of AgriStack, you have multiple registry use cases which can be built around it. In fact, earlier today I was introduced to an agri-tech startup who was doing something around climate change and were very keen on finding where they can fit in to the scheme of a similar platform to what this currently looked like. It does not have the registry today as we see the current modules which were shown to you, but it becomes a very open architecture to keep adding more registries over a period of time. What AgriStack and what UFSI enabled in the entire conversation is that once data structures and schemas are standardized, it becomes easy for the entire ecosystem to speak that one language. So whether it is suppliers of data or whether it is consumers of that data. And I think that's what will solve for any data source or any data stack. I hope that addresses the climate one.
Yeah. And so what is the feel of the panel about capitalism and private sector? Sorry, I don't know, it's 5:30, if we can write a book. Yeah. Yeah, Christian.
So I'm Christian Rothwell, I'm from ADB, India Resident Mission. So I just wanted to ask Papua New Guinea also, because the presentation was interesting that you are also embarking on something similar in terms of collecting data and making use of it in the overall value chain enhancement and farmers' income increase. I mean, that's what I could gather. So when you look at something like AgriStack, for example, do you think it's easily doable in a smaller scale in Papua New Guinea? That kind of thinking, that's one. Second question is also to OECD presentation. It was about the phytosanitary certificates, etc. So what is your suggestion in the sense that in the context of countries like India which want to export, so do you think there is a possibility of that kind of solution which you have made being made available to countries like India or other countries?
So thank you. I think we cannot left a question completely unreplied. So before giving space to Regina and to Annelise to reply more seriously to the intervention before. So I don't know what is the feel of the panel, but ADB is a bank. Banks are created to loan money. And we have tools to loan mostly to states. Our budget goes mostly to sovereign states. However, ADB also have specific funds, for example, for small and medium enterprises, for small entity, for green transformation, and also has budget for venture capitalism. However, in these present geopolitical scenarios, who come to us to ask for budget are states. Okay? So we have funds that can be accessed down to the small enterprises, but we have very few requests, okay? So that's what I can reply to you. We have been assigned a role, starting from the Bretton Woods Conference after the Second World War, World Bank was created, and then in 1967, ADB was created in a similar way. That's our role. Regina, can you reply to the question of Christian? Yes.
Thank you. Yes, I was very, just looking at the advance, in the AgriStack presentation, and thinking back of the project at a scale that compared, but it is very interesting, and digital technology is now the way going forward. And looking at, the young generation, having a mobile phone, everybody, they just don't look up, they look down at their phones going around. So, this is the way going forward. And also, I also in my presentation, I mentioned about, the agriculture survey or agriculture census, that we have a 50-year gap, and the solution would be the doing it digital way. And they have already gone way to register, the population in Papua New Guinea. It's just 10 million. There's 1.6 billion, and they are able to register the farmers. And so that's a very large scale. But it would be really good to at least extend that kind of, into try to probably at a pilot stage, maybe for a commodity per se, so that at least we can see how we can tap into using digital technology to probably do maybe a coffee survey using a digital technology, and also registering coffee farmers. So, it is very interesting, and we would like to maybe have this kind of technology be applied, but to start off in a pilot way, maybe do a one commodity at a time. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. They are really trying to disrupt the idea of having something that photograph agriculture as static. They want to see what it changes in the field every 5 minutes, more or less. This is their ambition. Okay, Annelies, can you reply to the other question, please?
Yeah, it would be my pleasure. Thank you for the question. So the question was asking whether these electronic certificates could also be used in other countries and OECD countries. What are the possibilities? And in fact, I quickly went over it in my presentation, but there is this solution called the ePhyto hub, which was developed by the International Plant Protection Convention, the IPPC. And so they have this hub where countries can exchange electronic certificates. And if you as a country, especially for developing countries, if you don't have the infrastructure to produce and to receive these electronic phytosanitary certificates, so this is only for phytosanitary, not for sanitary, then they have this system called the GENS, the Generic ePhyto National System. And so countries can connect to the hub using these GENS. And so some countries might have their own national electronic systems, and then these GENS allow all countries that don't have a national system to produce or to send or to receive these electronic certificates to still do this through this hub. So the answer is yes, especially for phytosanitary certificates. It's possible for developing countries to start exchanging those using this ePhyto hub.
Thank you. And Kishan, there are certain countries that want to do it with ADB already. I am also already in discussion. We can also talk later. So we are already in delay. People is complaining with me, so we need to close. We like it or not, the discussion is very interesting, but we need to close. And so thank you for your presence. And yeah.